Hello, this is a video that I think everybody who's starting to refill and don't really understand how a Canon cartridge works, and even those who think they do, who already know, should probably take a look at. I'm going to explain how the Canon cartridge is constructed and the kind of terms we're going to use in describing what we do. This side here, where there is ink, we normally call it a reservoir. This side here is the sponge side, or sponge, even though it isn't a sponge but more a fibrous material. We typically call it a sponge. This is a seal that you tear off when you get the cartridge, and this is also the steel that you remove before you place it into the printer. Now let me move ahead to show you more of the construction of the cartridge. The first thing to remember is that whenever ink leaves the cartridge and is being used to print, air must enter the cartridge. And that's the reason why the seal has to be removed. Always remember that. So when that seal is removed, air goes into the cartridge through a pathway here. Enters into this little slot, this tunnel, goes into a chamber, exits the chamber, goes around, goes into another chamber, goes around into another chamber, then it enters into the sponge side. The sponge side is connected to the reservoir through a little slot down here. So essentially ink is connected through that way. Here is the plug that we use for refilling. In addition to that, there's a few other things you always have got to keep in mind here with the Canon cartridge. There's a hole here. Let's take a look here. There's a wall that separates the reservoir from the sponge, and this wall has to be sealed perfectly at the top to be airtight. And the plug is whenever we put it back in, it's got to be airtight. So when the cartridge is being used, air enters here, ink exits here, and air enters nowhere else. If ink is dripping out of the cartridge or it's leaking, you've got a leak somewhere else. Either you haven't resealed your refill hole, or you've got a crack on top here, or you've got a break between the wall here that separates the reservoir and the sponge. A lot of third-party compatible cartridges have this problem. The reason they leak so quickly and empty so quickly into your printer with hardly any printing is because there's a leak here and they're not built very well. A lot of them, in fact, and you actually end up using a lot of ink and dumping it to your printer without you even knowing. The other thing that you've got to understand with these cartridges is Canon has built in an ink detector system. It's right down here. We call that the prism. The prism will not reflect light when it's full of ink, and it will reflect light when it has no ink. So by Canon shining a little light beam through here and reflecting back to a receiver in the printer, it can detect whether or not there's ink in the reservoir or not. And this is the outlet. We'll call that the outlet. Just to give you a little example of how the prism works, I've got a cartridge here and you can compare it. I think you might be able to see that one can reflect light and one cannot. So that'll give you an idea how the prism system actually works, and you'll find out in a little more advanced video how this is actually used to advantage and how it is used to meter ink out. Oh, one other little thing about the Canon cartridge. Along the separated wall here, there are actually little slots that allow air to enter into the reservoir chamber. So let me show you what's going on here. When ink is being used, it exits the reservoir, goes through the sponge and out into the printer. But when ink exits, what did I say? Air must replace it. So air enters through the top, through these slots, goes here, goes through the sponge, through these little slots, and goes back into the reservoir. So as the reservoir empties, air comes back in and takes place of the ink that is going out. Okay, I think that should give you a basic idea of how the Canon cartridges work And I look forward to you going to my next video where I get a little more detail into how we refill these and how to do it actually properly and what to watch out for. Because in as much as these things look very simple, there are a few little things that many people just don't simply understand that are crucial in getting reliable performance and reliable refilling out of these Canon cartridges. Thank you.